I wanted to welcome everyone to our webinar on maximizing your holiday profitability. So my name is Russ Spencer. I'm the Director of Account Management here at Craftable. Alongside me, I have my coworker, Jim Now, who's a trusted friend in industry. I'm going to start by giving you a little background on myself, and then I'll let Jim do the same, and then we'll go deep into the information. So like many of you, I cut my teeth in the industry starting in the dish pit. My journey started in the summer of '85. So yes, I just aged myself there. So after 30 years in operations, working a few different large chains across the Midwest, running multiple restaurants across multiple states at the same time, I really took my experience to the consulting side. I will tell you one thing I learned is that larger companies aren't necessarily more profitable because they drive more sales. Okay, it's that they really understand what drives those sales and how to make money off that sales. So it's not because they pay cheaper for labor or cheaper for the groceries, but they leverage the data, they forecast, they understand what's getting ready to happen. They have great SOPs in place, great AORs in place. They hold their teams accountable. They monitor and measure, and they adjust on the fly. And that's the difference. And so that's where we see the margins tend to be significantly higher than, let's say, the independent that might be missing some of that. So we hope today to really walk through some of those SOPs that might be able to help drive impact. So again, after 30 years in operations, I started consulting in 2015. And that's where I bumped into Jim. I was working with small regional chains and independent operators trying to replicate many of those same SOPs. One thing I realized quickly, though, was I didn't have the tools that I had when I was working for larger organizations. I did bump into Craftable for the first time in 2019. I was able to start driving impact with the operators I was working with. We're able to use this data to forecast, monitor, measure, and can continue to adjust. I joined the Craftable team as Director of Account Management in 2023, February of 23. And then I just recently brought Jim over here to join us. So Jim, you want to take a moment and talk a little bit about your background and what brought you here?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Russ. So not quite as many years in the beverage business as yourself. I've got about 25 years under the belt. I do had a previous career in finance for about 10 years as well. Right now, I own 2 restaurants as well as I work for Craftable. So I bring a little bit different perspective than Russ does. I never worked for the big chains. I didn't have a lot of these tools. Had to build some things myself in spreadsheet, but definitely coming from the finance sector, learned the importance of numbers, the importance of applying technology. And I'd like to think I bring that to the table right now as well. I was also a restaurant operations consultant for a large broadline distributor. That's where Russ and I kind of worked together. Did a lot around the CARES Act, PPP. You remember all that stuff? Restaurant grants. Still got the tax credits going, everything else like that. So a strong finance bend on that as well. And then right now I'm the sales account manager. So not only do I work with existing customers, but I try to help folks get the most out of the tools that they're using from Craftable. Get the return on investment because, you know, I always say it's a gym membership, right? You can pay the money, but you actually have to do the work when you walk into the gym and actually do that. So I've been with Craftable about 6 months. And I will say this one last thing. I think one of the reasons that I can have that day job at Craftable and be able to still hopefully somewhat successfully manage my restaurants is leveraging that technology. Craftable is a huge component of that. Thanks, Russ.
Thanks, Jim. That's pretty awesome. As you guys can see, we come from different paths, but we rely on each other's expertise to continue to support a broad range of our customers and prospects. So it's a neat background and how we're able to use it. So today's agenda, really quick. I want to take just a minute and kind of set the stage with some KPIs and the current state of our industry. And then really how to position your business going into Q4 to not only protect the profits, okay, but maximize those profits, and then also catapult your business into P1 of 25 for a successful start of the year. So as we go along, there's going to be questions, I'm sure. So feel free to drop those in the chat. And at the end of the conversation today, we'll actually take time to go over those questions. So just a couple numbers to think about when it comes to the state of the industry. And these are some pretty staggering numbers, and I'm sure some of us can relate to them. Okay, but the NRA reported in 2023 that 38% of operators were not profitable. So think about that. That's 1 in 4. And you have to ask yourself, why? How did we get to that point? When I started in the industry, the margins were high. You just put your head down and work hard. Okay, but since 2019, we've seen cost of goods on the food side increase by 20%. I'm sure you can relate to that. We've also seen wages increase by 30%. Okay, and this number I don't believe, but NRA reports that 45% of operators are struggling with staffing. I don't know if that's true. Jim, can you relate to some of these insights? Do you think that number is correct? Is it high?
I think it's too low. I definitely think it's too low. I think 99, obviously not that much, but I think that's probably one of the biggest issues gripping. And it really depends upon your state too. But I think one of the biggest issues gripping the industry: how do you get good talent? How do you keep good talent? How do you use good talent in a mutually beneficial way to leverage the profitability?
So let me ask you a question. So, with these results coming out of 23 and now we're wrapping up 24 and we're going into another tough year, all forecast says 25 is going to be tough as well. You brought it up earlier, but kind of revisit, how have you adjusted since post-COVID to overcome some of these challenges?
I can definitely relate to that losing money in 2023. At the new place, one of them opened in 2023. I don't know that it was so much the industry as it was the first year, and getting things running and up and moving along those lines. But I see the industry moving a lot towards fast casual, that sort of that limited service model. And I think that has to come on people's radar, especially if they're playing in that space where they can sell into that environment. I do think, we saw in COVID, we saw an explosion of to-go business and, third-party delivery companies and everything else like that. Everybody's own to-go. Everybody who didn't have online ordering now has online ordering from that perspective. So whether it's that, now we're seeing that expansion into people aren't going back necessarily to the workspaces in the offices, but they are still doing sort of offsite catering, right? So maybe they're doing it smaller, maybe they're doing it at a restaurant, they're getting together there from that. So I think the on-site and the off-site catering, as well as the to-go business, has really changed the industry. And then, one of the things that I've always tried to do is trying to leverage technology for two reasons for me. It's for data, right? These decisions are made on data. Better data that you have and you collected primarily through that technology, I think that's going to help you react, as well as efficiency, right? Everybody needs to do a food cost. I think you need to do a food cost every week. I think you need to do a labor cost every week. Those things were way more time consuming. Now they're much less time consuming if you use the right technology to do that. So where do you save that money with technology? I think you can save it on labor. I think, looking not just controlling your costs, but your POS system. If you don't have handhelds to be able to go to the table and that server has to walk back and forth from a workstation to the table and back, you count the trips. There's an opportunity to reduce your labor costs by leveraging technology, maybe in that situation like a POS system. It's going to make you more efficient. It's going to give you that data driven decisions that you want to do. We personally looked at a hybrid service model. So we do full service at the table, but we have the QR codes there. I'm going to stereotype, the older couple comes in, wants the paper menu, wants to pay cash, wants that full service. Hey, we're going to give you that ability to do that. But at the same time, you got that young millennial. They come in at an off hour. We're not quite staffed up as much. They don't want that full service. They want to sit down, scan that QR code, get going. They may not even talk to their server or just talk to them a little bit less. We give people that opportunity to do that at one of my restaurants and have that sort of hybrid service model from that perspective. And then I will say the last thing is there's a concerted push in both of the restaurants that I own to just keep growing that to-go business. I think that's just going to keep going and growing. And, yes, COVID spiked it up and maybe it came back down a little bit, but I still think there's an opportunity to send that food outside the four walls. And you need to think if your business model can handle that and how you can really take advantage.
It's crazy how technology has changed our industry. I would jokingly say that my daughter sent me a text message one day and she said, "Happy birthday, Dad." And I looked at her and I said, "You're sitting next to me. Could you have just said it?" Right? See, our clientele's really shifted. And you think now when you walk into just the supermarket, you check yourself out and bag your own groceries, right? And in many cases, when you walk into some of these larger big boxes, you actually check yourself out without even going through a cashier. So really, it's interesting how it's shifted. So, well, here we go. We're going into Q4, right? So many of us see the opportunity to pad the bottom line, go in the black, and protect the profits as we go into Q4. A lot of additional traffic hits our market. Okay. And so it's really important to take advantage of this opportunity to set yourself up. Okay. And it all starts with being prepared. I always like to refer back to what the Roman philosopher Seneca says. He says, luck happens when preparation meets opportunity. Okay. So really that's where your opportunity is. We're going into Q4. Are you going to be lucky or are you going to be prepared? Now I'm going to go back to my background a little bit. We were a larger group. Okay. We were franchised. We had to be responsible with money, but we had a lot of great support out there. So one thing that I'll tell you that came from that though was they were driving Salesforce. All we had to do was focus more or less on being prepared. And being prepared for us started with understanding what was going to happen. So it started with forecasting. So as we roll into Q4, I really challenge you to start to think about what is the business going to look like. Us personally, as we projected the weeks, we always looked at last year's results, same week, multiplied it by a 5-week trend of current times and adjusted for what we knew. So if I know next week I'm going to do 80 grand in sales, but I'm also up 20% in sales, what does that look like? Okay. However, I also got a bus on Saturday and we got a home football game. So let's factor that in. So really just starting with a true understanding of what are those sales going to be. The next piece that we really looked at is what week did those sales occur in? What day of the week did it occur in? What was the middle period that it occurred in? What revenue stream did it occur in? So for example, it was typically seen an increase on Thursdays, a decrease on Friday lunches or whatever it might be. It was coming at lunch, okay? It was coming from the bar and catering. We saw a decrease in dining, whatever it might be. So it's really about aggregating that data that Jim talked about, okay? Looking back on past history plus current trends, adjusting it for what we know is coming, okay? And then breaking it down. Now from there, what we did, we had more fun with this. At the store level, we start to take the average check, okay, divided by the sales to understand what we can expect in traffic. So now not only are we looking at sales, we're looking at bodies. So think about it. If you do $10,000 in sales and you run a PGA of $36, that means we're going to serve 277 guests today. All right, have fun with that. Break it down AM and PM and start monitoring. Did you hit 277 or were you at 290 or were you at 250? Okay, so that's the starting point. And as you progress throughout the period, constantly stop, assess, and reset. So again, I want you to go back to what we were talking about in that very structured environment is we had the sales because they were being pushed in. Okay, we really took the time to plan accordingly. Okay, and then we constantly assessed and readjusted. Maybe, maybe, I don't know, there's a new store that opened up and it impacted us. All right. Or so, maybe all of a sudden a store across the street closed and all of a sudden our sales spiked. So it's really, again, that's how we monitor. We didn't have to plan, okay, for the sales because they were there. We just forecasted on where we thought those sales were going to come from. So Jim, got to challenge you, a little bit different background. How do you handle these situations as you go into Q4 to kind of be prepared for the influx of sales?
Sure. Before I touch on that, Wes, I think one of the key things you said was, you prepare yourself, right? You have the strategy for how you're going to do that, and then you got to react to it, right? So you got to be able to see that data in real time. Or where are we on the same day versus last year versus today? Right? And looking at that, are we where we need? Where are we on our overall labor cost on a given day? We have to adjust. You know what? Business isn't coming in. We need to actually cut labor on the floor, or we've got more business than we thought. We need to make sure we're ramping up our labor on the floor. We need to make sure we're ramping up our prep for the next day and making sure we have those levels. So I came from a little bit different. I come from the single operator, single unit or maybe a couple of multi-units. And we did not have the luxury of having that traffic automatically come to us. Maybe we didn't have the prime spot. Maybe we didn't have the prime branding and marketing behind it. And we had to go out and plan a little bit more for getting that business to come in. So what do you need to do? One of the biggest revenue generators of both the restaurants I have is holiday parties. You have to be on point. There's more and more competition for holiday parties out there. So do you have a marketing plan? Do you have a social media plan to go out and let people know, like, hey, we've got this event space and we'd love to host your holiday party? What's going to differentiate you from the other opportunities where someone else could book from that perspective? Are you going back to the people that had an excellent holiday party at your restaurant and then saying, hey, come back again, we're going to give you a deal? Or, go to someone and say, hey, if you book with us and you book your holiday party, you, Mr. Jones who booked it, we're going to give you a little gift card or coupon to come in and try us out on the dates. Planning those holiday parties is really big. Selling gift cards is another huge component. As an independent, you're not necessarily selling them across a huge chain component, but you're selling them, that's cash in pocket for yourselves. Do you have an organized plan to sell those gift cards? You need to capture gift card sales when people come into your restaurant when it's busy during the holiday season, but you need to have a plan to sell those digitally online or get reach from that perspective. Maybe you sell the gift card for a $100 gift card, gives you a $20 coupon that you can redeem in store at any point in time. Have some marketing plans and some sales plans around selling those gift cards. Maybe you package it with merchandise. If you've got merchandise, do I sell a shirt and a gift card or something else like that? What you think about that? Social media is really, really important. Telling folks that you've got these cool events going on, as well as remember to book with us from that perspective. And then if you're going to do these events and you're going to do these parties, you need to be profitable on them, right? You need to be able to price these packages out. If you're doing things that are off your typical menu, you need to be able to look at the cost of creating those packages, or maybe you have set packages and then you do other things, but you need to cost these things out. So having a technology where you can quickly cost out party packages or make packages from items that you already have costed out, like you can do in Craftable from that perspective. We do that all the time. We don't do a party without knowing what that party is going to cost us to be able to do that. Then, similar to Russ, I always like to review last year's data. Obviously, sales volume is huge. Russ already talked about product mix, labor, and staffing. You need to look. I love a tool that tells me what did I do on this day last year. Well, if I did say $10,000 last year, but I had a huge event and that event was $4,000, maybe I'm only going to staff to $6,000 this year because I don't have an event that day. Or the opposite, maybe we were only $2,000 last year on this day, but this year we were able to book a big event that evening, and now we need to have extra staff on it. So you need to be able to go back and historically look at what did you do on that day, how much sales volume, what was the weather. You know, where I'm out here in Buffalo, New York, weather absolutely shuts the door sometimes. Knock on wood, we didn't lose any Christmas parties last year, but you can absolutely take a look at that and see how that's impacted your business from that perspective. And then I'm going to drive this home, Russ. I think this is really important to talk to folks about. You need to continue to do the things that you've always done, even though you're busy. So we have weekly manager meetings. Manager meetings become, in my mind, even more important in that busy season of December, late November, early December, because we got to communicate on these parties. We got to execute these events. We got to make sure we're all on the same page. We got to make sure we're communicating to the staff. This is how we're selling gift cards, or how we're handling this or that, whatever that may be. You absolutely positively cannot just say, hey, you know what, we're going to be busy. I'm not going to look at cost of goods. You definitely need to look at cost of goods. You got higher sales volume going on right now. Those numbers should be better. Russ, you know, sales solves all problems, but can we make it as efficient as possible? We also have to look at that cost of goods on, hey, what are we doing with these parties? We price them out this way. We don't typically do this. We need to make sure that we're making the profit margin that we need to make to on those parties from that perspective. And then labor, right? We're ramping up labor to get through this busy holiday season, but we still got to cut when it's not busy. We don't just want to ramp it up, have it be really busy and not be as profitable as we could be. We want to keep an eye on that. We want to do that analysis. So again, every week, even during the holiday season, manager meeting, cost of goods sold analysis, labor analysis, and then working it as like what we do throughout the year when it's maybe not this busy season. So I think keeping that routine is really important as well. And how are you going to do that? Your cost of goods sold can't be a multiple hour, half day to a day long consuming project. You know, doing that labor analysis can't be something that takes a really long time. You need to have that data and information in front of you. And that's, again, how you leveraging technology to have that information at the tip of your fingertips, doing the same program you always do in the middle of your business.
Man, I mean, you went through so much, and I just writing notes down here because I want to run back and revisit. So I hope I can get them all. But the one thing I want to go back to at the very beginning, we said in 2023, and a lot of this momentum is carried forward, right? 38%. So 4 of 10 operators were not profitable. As you go up in sales due to Q4, I want you to think about what you're trying to manage. Sales go up if you're not profitable. Almost every one of the costs associated with sales going up is variable. Okay, so if you're not profitable doing 2 million, you're not going to be profitable doing 3 million. Okay, because think food, liquor, and labor go up. You didn't use less cheeseburgers because you sold more, right? So Jim's right. It really starts with maybe going back and monitoring, measuring, and tracking that data to make sure that you're leveraging it. I wrote down a couple other things. It's funny. I go back to tech, and I'm gonna pick on my kids again here. There's no way my kids understand how to balance a checkbook. They never had to learn, right? They have a phone in their hand that tells them how much money is in their bank account at all times. Okay. So they call me and they say, Dad, I'm low on gas. Can you loan me $12? I'll pay you back next Tuesday. It's because they have a pulse on their bank account. So I think, again, revisiting the power of tech during these crucial times is very important to be able to, leverage the profit. I'm gonna go to gift cards. He said something there. I want to unpack it too. Okay, gift cards. Think about how often you shop online anymore. I sat there last night and did a lot of shopping online and never left the couch, right? So again, if you don't have an avenue to open up that stream for online gift cards, you really need to stop not only one and open that door, but really how do you leverage it? How do you promote it? How do you put it out on social media? Run contests. And then the last thing Jim said I wanted to go back to.
Think about that too on social, on the gift cards as well too, Russ. When you're selling that gift card online, what else are you getting?
Yeah, you're getting
data about your customers.
That's right.
But not only that, but you're getting an email address, maybe a cell phone number from maybe it's not the customer who's ultimately going to get the gift card.
Yeah.
And hopefully you get that as well too, but you can also get the email of the person that bought. You've just picked up 2 emails. What's the cost of trying to buy an email program and be able to do that online marketing, that social media marketing or your mailer or whatever it may be. So you're increasing revenue and increasing your data.
And that data is valuable. I mean, I can tell you, I'll pick on a large chain here in my market that I eat at often. Okay, if I fail to show up for more than 2 weeks, they send me a reminder. Okay, hey, haven't seen you. Come for your cup of coffee, and here's a chocolate chip cookie. Okay, why? Because they have my data, they recognize my patterns, they know how to get me back in. And the name of the game many times is increasing frequency, and then not just increasing frequency, but steering that frequency where you want it to go. Okay, for example, if you're maxed out during meal periods, why are you trying to drive additional revenue during meal periods? Maybe you do, hey, buy one, get one free between 9 and midnight. So you're really just taking that traffic and you're reorganizing it and moving it somewhere else that you can execute it over a period of time instead of all at once. But again, you can't do that if you don't have this data, and it all starts with having that data, understanding how to read it, how to leverage it, how to drive it. And if you remember at the beginning, when I said the difference between corporate America with very structured SOPs that drive profitability, they start with leveraging that data. So I'm going to go into something he talked about there. And this is something that often, if not overlooked, if overlooked, it really not only costs you lost sales, costs you profit, it costs chaotic shifts, which ultimately damage your brand. I got a couple things I wanted to talk about before we run out of time. The first one is staffing. Okay, so I think it's really important for us to stop right now. We talked earlier that 45% of operators, which Jim and I both disagree with, say they have a staffing issue. Okay, I think it's much higher. Okay, the best way to resolve staffing is not need staff, right? So how do you leverage tech to do that? How do you hire smart, train hard, take care of your people, and stop the turnover? So I challenge you as you start to get ready to go into the holiday season, start to think about what you're currently doing. Okay. Think about your workforce today. Your workforce today is not who it was pre-COVID. Okay. They're looking what's important to them, flex hours. Okay. PTO. Think about maybe how you schedule. I found myself in markets where we were in resort towns, that we had 3 shifts. I mean, we literally had 3 and sometimes 4 shifts because we got hammered again late at night. So where in the book does it say shift changes at 4 o'clock every single day? It doesn't. I remember running a restaurant, a town where we had a college football team, and we were just getting hammered every Saturday afternoon when the game was out. And this young lady who worked with me comes up to me. I was a young manager at the time, and she says, "Why don't we do shift change at 2 o'clock on Saturdays right before the game lets out?" I'm like, "Why did I think about that?" Right? So really stop and look at where that traffic is. Look at how your staff actually, when are they coming in? Think about what's important to them. Flex hours, PTO. Think about, is it 2 shifts a day? Is it 3 shifts a day? Also, I want you to revisit right now. I want you to think about overtime hours. Overtime doesn't mean the labor that was lost when they worked the overtime. That 40 hours means that employee is exhausted for all 40 hours and the following week. So really try to balance that. Take the time right now to start visiting, request offs as you go into Q4. Who's coming home for the holidays? Who's not? Who's leaving? Who wants to work more? Who wants to, think about the shifts. Wild Turkey Wednesday is always a big day in the bar scene for us. Okay, think about Thanksgiving Day or Black Friday, Christmas Eve. What happens between the week of Christmas and New Year's? Think about New Year's Day. Start thinking about that and then write a staffing plan. Understand who you need. And as you start to take care of these employees, start to think or bring these employees on, think about how you're going to train them and retain them as you go into January. Jim, I know we're going to run out of time on this topic, but we could talk all day on it. Is there anything you want to chime in on that?
I think that staffing thing, let's go back to technology, request off, right? If you're not using an online scheduling tool, you are in the dark ages. You're coming back when you're in the 20th century and not in the 21st century. You need to make sure that you got your folks locked in and that you're able to do that. And I do like those ideas. Hey, you know what? It's busy time anyway. Let's pick these different days like Black Friday, or I never heard of Wild Turkey Wednesday, although I think I'd like to try it. And get folks in the door to do something because people are moving, they're shifting, right? If you're in a smaller town or you're in somewhere where a lot of people come back for the holidays, how are you attracting? How are you getting to those folks? You can't send them a mailer, right? Maybe you spend some money on Google Ads to get them in the door. Like, hey, how do you get drinks near me or happy hours near me or food near me? Everyone, needs to think about how they can get folks in the door when it's a heavy traffic season. So I do think the labor is huge.
All right. So
and
now
mutually, one last thing, mutually beneficial relationships with your employees. Right? This cannot be, I employ you and I pay you money. The only reason you work is because you pay me money. If you're going to be busy and you're going to have a busy holiday season, maybe you've got salary folks and you're like, hey, you know what? I know you're going to work 50, 60 hours this week because you're on salary. We're going to take some time when we get into January and take a little bit of extra time off or give them incentives, right? Other incentives that just aren't cash or money. Maybe it's a holiday party. Maybe it's running a server contest and the money and the giveaways and money. It's a night out or something else like that. Or one-on-one time with the boss, right? That's a great mutually beneficial way to connect with your employees and get an employee for a long period of time.
What's funny about that is, I said earlier, the best way to resolve staffing is not need new staff, right? So lower your turnover. And, your employees today have more choices in employment than you have in employees to choose from. right? And so it's really about understanding how to take care of those employees. And I jokingly laugh that I think if somebody offered my daughter pet insurance, okay, she would choose to work for them because I think her dogs are just as important to her in her life as anything else, right? So think outside the box on what it takes to keep those employees around. So I want to go into the next topic here really quick, and this is important. As you see the increase in traffic come through your door, this is a massive opportunity to do what we call menu engineering. And when you're doing menu engineering, what you're trying to do is you're trying to change the behavior of your customer. Okay. A properly engineered menu can drive anywhere between 2 and 10% of additional gross profit to the bottom line. And I want you to think about this. As you engineer a menu, it's just like it's chess match. Every move you make on the menu has a consequence, good or bad. And it's important for you to understand that consequence prior to making the move. Okay, measure the impact and then measure the results. So if I'm going to end up, let's say, putting a shaded box around a certain item, okay, or do a call out or raise a price on an item, could I be moving somebody to something else on the menu? Okay, so make sure you monitor that impact. So when I'm looking at measuring or menu engineering, there are a couple moving parts I'm trying to balance. Number one, I need to know what is the most profitable item in that section of the menu, not the overall menu. What I want to understand is I look at appetizer. What is my most profitable appetizer? Second thing I want to look at is can I execute that appetizer? Because I don't care if it's profitable. If I can't execute it, I lost the profitability in the execution. It took too long to get out of the kitchen. It crashed us. Okay. Third part is does it represent the integrity of your brand? Because I don't care if it's profitable, it's easy to execute. If it doesn't bring the customer back, it doesn't have contribution of profit. So really all starts with understanding what am I paying for the product? What am I selling it for? How do I need to leverage it on the menu? And you think about that, if you put a picture of an item on a menu, studies will show that you'll sell 30% more of that than an item without a picture. Think about
Put a box
shaded
on it.
boxes. What's that? Yeah,
Put a box
shaded
on it for sure.
boxes. Keywords. What are you running a server contest on? I used to try to run a server contest on what wouldn't crash my kitchen. Okay. On football Saturdays, I'm like, these are, spinach artichoke, sell it. It's quick and easy. But, it's really, balancing all those parts and then, pushing that. This is your opportunity. Again, think about your sales in Q4. What if you found 2 to 5%, let alone 10? Can I pair beverages with burgers? Do I do a wine pairing with a chicken? How do you take the opportunity to drive that profitability? Jim, anything you want to
Don't
throw on
be,
that?
yeah. And I think you brought up, you kind of tangentially touched on it, but don't lose sight of it. Is like, your profitability from your menu items does come from the cost of goods, but it also comes from the amount of labor that you're spending on it. So Russ brought up a
Yeah.
really important thing. If it's busy, and two items are equally as profitable, sell the one that, highlight the one, move the one that takes quicker execution. Can you turn that table, and get that table in there and out of there because they picked items or they re-engineered the menu to have them pick items that allow them to dine faster, and then we can use that seat again. So I think that's really important. Don't make those menu items. Don't look at those menu items back from that perspective. And then obviously, if you're going to do some holiday features or specials, you're going to bring the special holiday beer or liquor or something else like that. You can get a little more profit for that, right? There's no doubt
Yeah.
about that. I mean, you can say, hey, you know what? You've got eggnog now, or you're going to do heated cider or something else like that, whatever that may be. Get a little premium on that because it's a seasonal thing, and people are like, you know what? The holiday season, I'm going to spend a little bit more money. But I
I
think
went to
that's really
Oktoberfest,
important.
Jim, over the weekend in our little community here, and $9 beer. And I didn't even blink an eye. I was like, okay,
Sure. Oh
right?
yeah.
Because the music,
Yeah.
the sound, the smells, the culture, it's like, $9 beer, I'll take one. Same beer previous week was $6. Yeah. Hey, I want you to think about one other thing when it comes to engineering. Okay. And this is something we used to do often when we would go on weights. All right. Is how can control what goes in that kitchen from my hostess stand? So really, again, thinking about, hey, we're on a weight, we're getting hammered, grill's crashing. How can I actually pull items off a grill, move them over to pantry? Okay. Or maybe how can I put some pressure on the bar to actually increase profitability while I'm on a longer weight? I used to use my host to make suggested sell as they or suggested sell as they sat the guests. So I'm crashing on grill. Hey, folks, take a look at our four-way sampler here, or whatever it might be. It took pressure off my grill that I can easily execute pantry. Okay, but we also kind of, we knew what data was coming in. We try to balance it all. So
And who's the digital hostess? So if you're not using an actual host in a full service restaurant, that's that QR code when you pull it up. It better be suggesting the things that make you more money. It
yeah,
better be suggesting the things that you want it to suggest because it's a busy time and you're like, you know what? I don't need the extra margin on this dish that takes 15 minutes to produce. I need that table. I'm gonna suggest that we sell on that app for things that get executed quicker. So almost like your digital host there from that perspective.
But none of it can be done if you do not understand what you pay for the product at the back door and actually how you execute it. Okay, so when that product comes through the back door, do you truly understand the plate cost of it, or at least the COP of what you're selling to be able to understand where my margins are? The next thing I want to go into really quick, okay, and this is an important one that I think I often overlooked myself, and that's the supply chain. All right. So as I'm getting ready to go on the holiday, there were many times that I had this great thought of what I wanted to happen in my bar. Okay. But did I secure that with my vendor? So I want you to take the time right now as we get ready to go on the holiday and start thinking about your vendor relationships. Are you securing the pricing? Are you securing the supplies that they need to provide you with to execute? Are you running a seasonal, LTO behind the bar that that needs additional liquor that maybe you need to source first? Okay. How many drops do you have scheduled with your vendor? We typically, we ran two. That was it. That's what we staffed for. But, during increased volume, did I maybe need to bump it another drop or two? Do you need to go to key drops? Can the vendor meet that requirement? So taking the time now to have these conversations with your vendor to secure that worry goes away. That's the last thing you want to worry about, right? Is the product coming through the back door. And so, Jim, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, a couple things. Shelf stable versus not shelf stable, right?
Good
So
thought.
you want to make sure, if it's shelf stable, you're talking about buying eggnog for the winter season, buy it now. If you've got the cash flow and you're not worried about it, buy it now. Make sure you're not going to have an issue when you get it at that point in time. But if it's something like you're going to try to get a good deal on tenderloin or something else like that, obviously there's a different shelf life that you're dealing with from that perspective. And then the other thing I like to do is you can't go to your vendors and ask them how much did I buy last year, because how much you bought might be different from how much you consumed. You might have not bought enough and you had to go to another vendor or someone else from that perspective. Or you might have bought too much and you were sitting on a bunch of it. One analysis that I love to do in Craftable is how much did I consume right up through the holidays? And then I immediately look at the days on hand report. I know I'm skipping ahead over here, Russ, but immediately look at that days on hand report again. How much stuff did I have left over? Because if I had a lot left over, you and I both know we're trying to get creative or figure out ways to blow through that extra product. We had too much from that perspective. Not saying you want to cut it so close that you run out of it. Obviously, we don't want to run out of anything. But if we know that we went really long on something, it just didn't work last year, well, don't go back and ask the vendor how much you bought. Go back and tell the vendor, hey, I want to do this much this year because I really struggled to get that through. How do you make that decision? You gotta go look at the data.
Usage.
Yep.
Hey, I want to piggyback on that because I always like to use the example of toothpaste, right? So what happens when you're almost out of toothpaste at home? Okay, do you get every bit of it out of there? Do you squeeze that? Do you roll it? Do you make sure if you have more, you waste it, right? So days on hand is important, and that you folks understand how we come up with that number. Days on hand is taking your usage divided by your days used divided by your ending inventory to help you understand how long that number is going to last, right? So if I use 70 pounds of burger in 7 days, you're using 10 on average per day. If you have 130 on the shelf, then guess what? You've got enough for 13 days worth of burger. If that's a perishable item, okay, and you don't have a food cost problem, I guarantee you will have a food cost problem. Okay. So what are you doing to move that product out? Okay. Is it an LTO? Is it special? Are you selling it? Are you doing a buyback? What are you doing? At the same token, okay, do you have enough to get until the next truck comes? Right? Because that creates another problem. Now you're all of a sudden selling items that you should be selling because you don't have it, or you're buying offline, which takes bodies out of the restaurant to source, and more likely you're paying higher and the quality's not there. So really take that time. The other thing Jim said, I want to go back to too, and he speaks of the eggnog, and it's a term we used to use often called speed scratch. All right. So yes, we started where we were all about scratch, right? So we had somebody in the kitchen shredding cheese, patting burgers, chopping lettuce. But the reality is it important to be speed or scratch on everything? I think if you're known for the product, don't compromise it. Okay. If you're known for your apple pie, do not compromise it. Stay with it. But if you have an apple pie that you sell as an upsell or an add-on, what can you do with the apple pie that comes in pretty much part cooked that you top off and then you put your toppings and your ice cream and your flair on it so you get it out of the kitchen quicker and you're reallocating that labor to where it matters, which is execution. Again, don't compromise what you're known for, but at the same time, don't invest in items that you're not known for as well.
I like that, Russ. The quality of pre-done products has really gotten a lot better, especially with flash freezing and everything else like that. We just did a beer and bourbon dinner where we basically used some really high end, semi-prepared, not everything from scratch, not everything pre-done, but we doctored it, right? We took a squash soup, and then we put our own crema in it and some pumpkin seeds. We dialed it up from that perspective. And I know there might be some chefs out there going, oh, I don't want to do that. Or whatever. It's not the way that we do. We got to do everything from scratch. Well, then I would tell you, go build your fire from scratch. Don't use the gas that's coming out of the, technology has changed. You can produce things better in mass and get them to the consumer in a better state than you can do them if you brought everything that's wrong.
So 38% of operators weren't profitable. And 45% say they're struggling with staffing. So why wouldn't you actually take that labor and reallocate it somewhere else to be able to be more profitable?
Exactly. Make your own salad dressings. That's me personally. When I go out, if they make their own salad dressings, at least they're putting thought into what they're going to make. They're not necessarily making everything else themselves, but they're the key components and parts, the signature things, the little details. They are doing that.
Love it. All right. So listen, we're going to go into one last topic here, and then we're going to open it up for questions here. And that is what happens going into Q1 of next year, right? So you load the gun, you're staffed, you're locked, you're loaded, you're ready. I had one restaurant where we're extremely high volume during holiday seasons. The first week of January, it would just plummet. And I don't care what anybody says, a slower restaurant's harder to manage. It really is. Okay, you leave a lot of money on the table. So, one of the things that were really important to our team, and we did it in Q4, and I saw it pop up in the chat there. Okay, we did it in Q4, but we really focused on it in Q1, and that was budgets. Okay, so we wanted to truly understand, what were we buying versus our sales? Do we have a declining budget? Are we monitoring those purchases? I even had certain stores where I said, I'm sorry, you're not ordering without my approval. I had other stores I wasn't worried about, but I knew which stores I had to keep an eye on because we had a declining budget. This started with projecting the sales, and we said, this is what you can spend in supplies, and this is what you spend in chemicals. You exceed that, I need to approve it. Okay, so then monitoring that. The other piece is, Jim mentioned earlier, there's a difference between purchases and consumption, right? So purchases is what I bought, consumption is what I used. You're never going to be able to understand what you used unless if you actually count your inventory. How often do you count your cash chip? I guarantee you count it every day and sometimes twice a day, and then you take it to the bank who also counts it. Okay, so the reality is you're constantly counting your cash and you're addressing the issue with shortage. So as you go into January, okay, and you take this plummet in sales, what are you doing to position your business for January and Q1 that you don't start in the red and have to wear black at the end of the year to survive? But really, what are you doing to make sure you're tracking the usage of those items? What are you doing to adjust your bars, not just in product, but also with your staffing? Don't treat every employee equally. As you come out of the holiday season, make sure if you're going to drop staff, you drop the right people, because the great people will go where they want, and you're going to be stuck with the people that you don't want. So, Jim, you've done this just as much as I have when it comes to these adjustments. What do you got?
You always say, number one, you got more money on your shelves than you do in your necessary, probably even in your bank accounts in some instances, but definitely that you have in cash in the building. There's no doubt about that. Looking at that days on hand, how much do I have in January? What do I do? How do I preserve it? Can I freeze it? If I can't freeze it, can I do some features to get it out of there? But, not only giving a budget, but also getting that inventory down. I can tell you in my restaurants, that's an opportune time if you want to close and do a deep cleaning, or you just want to give the staff some time off or something else like that. Depending upon where you are and what your business looks like, you may be in a mall, and there's a lot of people coming back and doing returns. Well, guess what? You're not going to close for the first 2 weeks after the first, right? Because people are going to still come back and do returns and everything else. Maybe it's a different time of year, but if you're somewhere else where you're in a ski resort and everybody comes in for between Christmas and New Year's and then they go away and it gets a little less busy or whatever that may be, you may want to consider shutting down from that perspective. You have to cut staff. Absolutely, positively have to cut staff. You have to project. You have to tell your staff going in, we're going to be real busy, and then I'm going to try to give you as many shifts as I can, but we're not going to be at the same staffing level that we were in busy December that we are in January. So can they take some time off? Can they go somewhere? Can you rotate that around from that perspective? So I think that's really important. Before we go on to the last part, I did want to remind folks too, if you have any questions and you want to put some in the chat, I think we have one in there right now. You're more than welcome to put any kind of question in there, whether it's tech related, whether it's anything we've talked about. Could come out of left field. Russ and I will give it an opportunity to answer that. Russ, you talked about we had quite a few hotel folks that maybe had registered for this, and I know I don't have the hotel background and you don't have the hotel background, but I think we should spend a little bit of time, just briefly, a couple minutes, talking about how it may impact the hotel folks. And again, Russ and I are spitballing here, but one thing that I know is if I was running a hotel, I know my occupancy, right? I know the days I'm going to be busy. I know the days I'm not going to be busy. Days that I'm going to have a full hotel. Number one, I better be staffed up. Number two, I better have an idea in my head about how do I keep them in the hotel. How do I
That's
keep
right.
them there instead of having them go somewhere else? But I think that's data. That's a certain form of data that's a little bit different than everyone else. But I think it's very important data, and you can absolutely positively plan accordingly on that data. If you're a hotel, you might have event spaces, right? So are you out there doing what? I mean, you may be a large multi-unit or Marriott or whatever, anything else like that. Are you going out and booking that private event space? You have great private event spaces. Can you do Christmas parties? Can you do things, office Christmas parties, or maybe there's still rehearsal dinners and things like that. But getting those events into your event spaces is probably got to be really important during the holiday season. I can tell you, we get a lot of requests to do, like public events where you open it up to the public and you sell tickets. I don't do those in December because I know I'm going to have a lot of private events of holiday folks coming in and wanting to just book a holiday party. Let's start doing those private events, sorry, those public events where we create an event for everybody to come in and use the space. Let's start doing those in January when we know we're not going to be as busy. And then one of the things I can see too, if I were in the hotel space, is how did you package those rooms, right? Can you package those rooms with dining? Can you do some sort of promo? Do you do some sort of giveaway? Do you tell everybody that, hey, if you book your holiday Christmas party here and you spend $10,000, I'm going to give you a free night in January, whenever that time is that your hotel isn't, from that perspective. So I know a lot of those come from the promotion aspect and everything else like that, but everything else we talked about inventory, days on hand, staffing, everything else like that, I think equates over to that hotel space. Anything else I miss on that, Russ?
Yeah, you know what? I'll go back to, I ran restaurants in resort towns, and the benefit of a resort town is the money was already spent, right? They budgeted, they're coming to town, they have it in their account, they know they're going to spend a blink amount of money. What am I doing to take more than my share? Right? I'm sorry, I'm greedy, so I'm not giving it up to the guy across the street. So the great thing about hotels and resorts is, number one, you know who's coming, right? Because you have their contact information. That's pretty cool. All right. So as they check in, to your point, how do I actually keep them on property? Because when they leave my property and they go somewhere else, then I miss the opportunity to capitalize on that sale. All right. One other benefit too that I always thought was interesting. Okay, when you think about the occupancy of a hotel, if I know at 100%, I sell, let's just say, I don't know, keep math simple. I know at 100% occupancy, I'm going to sell, I don't know, 100 Heinekens. Okay. But now I'm only at 70% occupancy tonight. Well, what do you think you're going to sell in Heineken? It's probably a good understanding that you're going to have a better idea of how to project your P mix according to your occupancy at the hotel. So how do you use the data between the two different platforms or two different revenue centers to maybe understand how am I preparing? What am I selling? How do I keep them on site? Again, we're getting ready to plan a little trip away for the holiday weekend next weekend with Veterans Day, and as we do, that money's it's already budgeted. So how are you going to capture that? So I know we covered a lot today, and I wanted to make sure that we revisit a couple things Jim mentioned. The ability to work a full-time job and manage his restaurant started with understanding the tech stack that he needed to be able to dial into the results. Okay, I'll also go back to my time towards the end of my career when we started embracing technology to really drive impact. Our margins were up. We were able to run with less people. We were able to be a lot more efficient, a lot more profitable. So it really is, it's time to stop, evaluate your tech stack. How is it assisting you? And use that opportunity. We've posted a survey. So if as you go through this, there it is right here, and you'd like to learn more, please let us know. If you're an existing customer, how can we drive impact? If you're not, and you want to learn more about how you can use tech like Craftable, please let us know. Jim and I will get on a call with you. We'll walk through kind of your unique situation. So with that being said, Jim,
before we
do you
get
want
into
to
the
throw anything
Q&A,
else? Yep.
yeah, I was going to say just around that tech thing, because I have that as a circular point that I want to come back to. I'm going to hammer home. It's a busy time of the year, but tech allows me to do my cost of goods, allows me to do my labor cost, allows me to do all of these things that I did when it wasn't as busy. Hopefully you're busy year round. Just applying it, but leverage that technology, keep doing those good habits that are going to make you profitable. Prime cost is 60% on average of what your expenses are. You've got to manage those. As sales go up, prime costs are going to go up. We want to make sure we're controlling. We should actually do better. Sales increase, we should do better. Use that technology for projections and staffing. That's really what we talked about. Talking from a 10,000 foot level, what do we talk about today? Tech to help you project, tech to help you staff. One thing we didn't touch on is I use technology to book my parties. If you're booking a lot of parties and private events, please don't just use a Google Calendar. Go and look at your POS company, and do they have a module that allow you to book parties and gather all that data and actually push it to your POS? Maybe use a different system to book your parties because it's a different event space, but please leverage that technology to not only book your parties, but see the information that gets there. bill your parties, whatever it be. There's great technology to go out there and do that. And then menu costing, right? Whether it's the limited time offers, whether it's the private events, whatever it is, you need a tool, again, like Craftable, where you've got all that data in there, you're purchasing all this stuff, cost out your menus, and then see how the costing out of your menus actually translated into how you use the profit and how profitable you were. And with that, Russ, I think we should move over to some questions. So I'm going to read them to you, and then you're going to answer them, and then I'll fill in with a little bit of detail. So Journey asked the question: in our restaurants, we use a lot of higher-end wine glasses, plates, etc., that our guests love, capitalize love, but we constantly have breakage, which is expensive. Do you have any advice on how to mitigate this? Is this something Craftable can monitor?
I'll tell you the first thing I always thought there, if I'm understanding the question, is make sure you have enough. Okay, because it always seemed to me that if I didn't have enough, that's where the breakage started. Okay, so again, I'm gonna go back to thinking about Craftable. If I know this is what I'm gonna sell and I need a 2-time rotation on that, okay, so how many wine glasses do I need to be able to actually then service the staff with that, or service the guest without actually running short? Because you know what happens when you run a glass to the washer, right? And it's cold, you're gonna break it, or if you pull it out and pour a glass of wine in it. So that would be one. Is we always started when we talk a lot about understanding pars, we always took our guest counts and multiplied it by 2.5 to understand kind of what we needed in plateware in China to be able to service that. I don't know if that helps answer the question. And keep in mind, Craftable is an inventory management platform, but it's not it's not just F&B, right? So we can bring in chemicals, paper, supplies, China, etc. Personally, we did inventory on China ourselves for a short period of time. And then we got away from doing inventory on China, because when we did inventory on China, we were only holding them accountable to what they broke. Okay. And so when we started holding them accountable to the entire purchase of the China, they started paying a lot more attention to it. So
yeah, I would add in there, if you really do want to count it, you do want to track it, there's no doubt you can put it in there. Obviously, you're not going to deplete it like you would a hamburger or a steak with a recipe or anything else like that. You're not going to build it into the cost. But, if you want to say every time you receive it, you just receive it, and then you count it, you can count you can only count it once a quarter or whatever you'd like to do in that tool, at least give you an idea of the volume that you're going through, and you can look at that breakage. But I think you bring up, Jeremy, a really important question. You might have to, some of it's breakage, but breakage could also be theft. That time of the year, folks are coming in, you got a really nice wine glass that's logoed and people love it, or it's just something that's desirable and new and like, this is really cool. We have the same thing at my place. We struggle with doing something really, really nice and then something that's serviceable but good and fits the quality of it. And when we do that thing that's really, really nice or whatever, there's a tendency to have it go out the door from that perspective.
can I throw one last thing in that too? Yeah. I love the fact that you're using high quality China, which is awesome. One thing I'll tell you that my own experience, and I think a lot of people relate to this, is people remember how they feel more than they taste. Okay, so I think while it's important, so tell that story about the wine that you're selling, create an emotional connection. I guarantee you, it's just as good in a separate glass. So, but I would say start with understanding usage. Make sure you have enough to 2 times it, if not 2.5, to ensure you're never in a situation where you're forcing China through quicker and breaking it.
Also, if you're buying new China and you can put a line pour on wine glasses, I'm a huge fan of that. I think one of the easiest ways to monitor and really shut down on waste is managing your wine pours. Those beautiful glasses that don't have any markings, real easy to overpour a couple of ounces. Next question, Ladora says, with retention and staffing being #1 challenge in the industry, do you have any suggestions or recommendations to ramp up staffing while also building retention for single unit operators?
Oh my gosh, this is my favorite question. Okay, I love this because again, I always say the best way to resolve staffing is not need staff. So it starts with hiring smart, which means hiring people that fit your culture. #1. #2, training them the way they learn, and then #3, retaining. And so we speak a lot about menu engineering, but I have an exercise I used to do with our folks called employee engineering as well. But I would say the one thing I would say is understand what your need is. So I always started with a staffing plan. And the way we did that was, let's just use servers and bartenders as an example. We'd write a mock schedule on everything we needed to be perfect, right? We didn't put names in it. It was just how many servers do I want for Monday lunch versus Monday night versus the bartender, et cetera. We did that for the entire week and we totaled the number. So let's just hypothetically say I need 100 shifts covered. If the average server wants to work 4 shifts, then I need 25 servers. If I have 18 servers, then I'm 7 short. I know 2 are leaving, so then I actually need 9 more. Okay, so now I actually know what I need. I also now narrow it down to what shifts I need. And then I will tell you, when I sourced people, when I was looking for them, I was always recruiting. But the one thing I'll say is, you want to be speaking to that employee that you're trying to recruit when they're listening. First of all, if anybody comes to you and says they're great at what they do and they're unemployed in this job, they're lying to you about one or the other, because that does not exist. Okay. So, number one, you want to hire somebody that's currently employed. All right. And give them a reason to come to work for you. All right. And then when you bring them in, you want to make sure you're taking care of the right people. Don't try to balance what's fair for one. It's fair for all. It's not. Okay, I'm not letting my best employees away from me. And I know we get in the habit of, well, Sarah's been with me for 5 years and she's my daytime server. Okay, but I think if you find somebody that fits that mold and drives your business forward, then you do everything you can to keep them there. I would also tell you the big challenge that I think that we've all experienced is our attention span's a lot less today than what it was maybe 15 years ago, because that little device we hold in our hand every day. Okay, so you have to start to train people the way they learn, which is with smaller doses of information that are bite-sized and retainable that they can relate to. A lot of people call it gamifying, right? So how do you gamify the training? How do you train? We used to train, we had 4 shifts, okay, and the 5th shift you were shadowing. And we learned over time that we had to start narrowing it down, that maybe it made, instead of 4 8-hour shifts, maybe it was 8 4-hour shifts. Okay, so it's really about restructuring the way they learn. I want to go back to one other thing. When it comes to recruiting, okay, I will use the example that if I wanted to recruit a cook, I can go to anybody's back dock at 10 o'clock at night because I know where all the cooks are. They're outside smoking cigarettes and complaining about the shit, right? So take that same mentality when you're trying to source staffing on how you're trying to social market your brand to those individuals when they're listening. For example, I might put a Facebook post out that we're looking for help at 2 o'clock in the morning because that's when the chefs are off, right? They're sitting home playing games, drinking a beer. All right. So maybe think about when do you target them, speak to them when they're listening. Don't give them too much to retain because they won't hold on to it. Smaller doses of information, train them the way they learn, and then keep them. And that's where I go back and say, visit how you actually staff, shorter shifts. We all grew up in the industry working 10, 12, 13, 16-hour shifts. It was just part of what we did. You can't do that to an individual today. They probably quit. Okay. So maybe it's 4-hour shifts. I don't know. Jim, go for it.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to give you specific examples. Who's off during the holiday season? Teachers are off. If you can get
Good
teachers,
call.
teachers make good money per hour as teachers, at least in New York State, but they make great money per hour when they're picking up those shifts because they worked in a restaurant and have that experience. Can you have that stable? You can get that stable with teachers to come back occasionally. You got to be a little bit flexible with them without a doubt. Who else is off? Students are off, right? And you get students to come in and work those hours. Again, you want to go to the well, you want to go back to the well. Hey, you can make those phone calls. I know you worked this past winter. Can you work this winter again too? What can I get? You're going to keep people if you get culture. If you have a good culture and you give your folks feedback, you got to do employee reviews. You got to give them feedback in some form or another. We could spend a whole bunch of time on that, but you drive that culture. You drive that feedback to your employees to make them better and to retain them as well. Give them good, give them bad. Everyone needs a carrot. Everyone needs a stick. Get your employees to recommend people, right? If you've got good staff, my head chef was the brother of a woman that I hired as a temporary cook for a little bit of time, but she was a great person. She recommended her brother. He's a great person. Now he's the head chef. So get your employees to recommend folks. And then work with other restaurants, right? Some people might be busy when you're not busy. Or you know what? Nobody wants to pay people overtime. So you're going to try to keep that person to 30, 35 hours a week. But maybe the restaurant right down the street is willing to let that person work for 10 to 15 hours a week, different times than you. And then they're going to send some of your people 10 to 15 hours per week so that nobody's paying overtime. So, everyone thinks we're all competition, but I think high tide rises all boats. I got a good employee that wants more, but I don't really want to give them more because I don't want to pay it. Then pay. Let them get a little, if they really truly have that work ethic and want to do that.
Jim, maybe we should have a webinar sometime on staffing because I know you and I can go around about this one. So, hey, I want to make sure we get the last question on the board there because it's an important one. Can you also maximize budgets in Craftable? Absolutely. So, one thing I will always say is you probably already do it. You might be doing it somewhere else. That might be, let's say, in a third-party platform like ProfitSword. You might be doing it on an Excel worksheet. You might be doing it on the back of a cocktail napkin. Okay, but absolutely. So if we can understand what your budgets are, which can easily be programmed into Craftable. We process your invoices in Craftable. Then we can actually deplete from your budget where you're at. The benefit of this is that we also set the budget based off of sales, and the sales fluctuate, the budget fluctuates. So if you say, hey guys, you got 8% to spend on supplies, if you do 100 grand and they're only going to do 90, that budget's going to readjust, and you're going to be able to constantly monitor where you're at versus how the sales are coming in the door. Jim, anything you want to throw on that?
No, I think that's a great idea. Also, in analytics, you can get those projected budgets from that too. You can look at previous sales data and be able to
Yeah.
produce
And I also like the
what
budget
those budgets
approval.
should be.
I really do.
Yeah.
Again, I'm gonna go back. I had stores where I would not let them actually order without me approving it. This is where I had stores I was comfortable with them doing it. But it really forced them to start to think about what they will order instead of blindly ordering. And we all done it. We've all done it. We've been there before and we go, heck, I forgot a food order, right? And you just fill in the blanks, and next thing you know, you got 14 boxes of film sitting on the shelf. So, hey, listen, I know we've covered a lot today and we're out of time here. But it's a great discussion as you go into Q4. Remember, luck is when preparation and opportunity meet. So as you go into Q4, are you taking the time to aggregate the data, better understand what's going to happen to your business, break it down, plan, communicate, adjust, set AORs, areas of responsibility, set SOPs, monitor, measure, and then, catapult your business into Q4. So it was a pleasure, and thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.